What makes your heart tick? What spiritual path are you on? What do you believe? Let's dive deep into all things mystical, into the heart of the matter. You are listening to Deep Water with Cheryl, Earth Alchemy. This is Cheryl, and you are listening to Deep Water. Today we have Bishop Nathan Wilson. How are you doing, Nathan?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So I wanted to talk to you about the symbolism of the rose. Well, first let's go back into the being a bishop. How long have you been doing that, and what got you into it?
Bishop-wise, I've been probably bishop for about a year, 2 years now, maybe. And priest-wise, I've been doing that for a bit longer, maybe 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
And as a Gnostic, about 5, 6, maybe 7 years living as a Gnostic.
How'd you get into Gnosticism?
We mostly get into it through suffering. And that's, I guess, how I found my path, through a bit of suffering first. Let's around and find out,
Right. Well, that's life, right? Suffering and FOFA. But so the symbolism of the rose, how prevalent is it in the Gnostic belief?
Well, the symbolism of the rose has been adopted by many esoteric cults, and thus it would have high symbolism within Gnosticism, not just within esoteric cults, but also within mystery religions and religions itself. So the rose would symbolize many things, from the masculine, the divine masculine, Sophia, representing Christ itself, the sacrifice, the red rose being the blood, and the opening mind. So, the blooming mind, the life itself that blooms.
Right.
So it has lots of things. So we have different realms within Gnosticism, just like Christianity or Judaism. There's different levels of heaven. Gnostic thought is usually called the pleroma. And so the rose itself symbolizes the many layers of the pleroma, or the pleroma becoming full again. So the Christians or good souls returning to the pleroma. So the pleroma opens up and blooms. So that's the blooming flower. And the flower also represents life, death, and rebirth. What was that, Cheryl? Sorry.
Are there certain steps to the opening?
Well, in regarding the opening, yeah, there would be. So there's different levels of your own mind, your own path. You start low and you start ascending. And thus, the flower starting off in the middle and blooming out. So the closer to the middle, the closer you are to the Godhead or the monad. So returning to the source.
Okay.
Which would be the highest level of all.
Right. The enlightenment everyone is searching for. Do you think the rose has any symbolism in with what you have researched and have found, like with Venus?
Well, in regarding to the rose being feminine, if you look at Venus, usually Venus was associated around goddesses throughout time. The very first gods were Venus goddesses, though they didn't have that name. That's more of a modern name. So people go, oh, Venus isn't that old. They don't actually know the traditions or anything, or let alone why people choose names. But regarding Venus as well, that would date with planets as well. So there was use of planetary symbols, sigils within magical rituals as well. Roses would be left around in rooms to symbolize privacy, or to be private alone with God. Also the act of sub rosa, which was a Roman practice, to leave roses in the rooms of meeting rooms where would take place for emperors, to symbolize that the meeting in this room is to be private, which will also be adopted by the mystery schools to state, the privacy alone with the spirit, alone with God, something that Jesus was also preaching as well. And the rose also symbolizing suffering and rebirth. If you look at the rose that opens, its life cycle itself, when it dies, it symbolizes life, death, and rebirth itself. So it's got heavy symbolism within Gnosticism and mystery schools. You have the Aphrodite religion, which was Greek goddess of love, sex, lovemaking. The followers that would follow her would also use rose petals surrounding the beds that the priestesses would use for sex rituals with, say, the king. It wasn't just anyone, depending on the level of priesthood, I was meant to say. So even that act of leaving flowers between the beds or in the room covered, we would adopt that ourselves for lovers. Leaving roses like the petal of your lover, So
yeah,
there's a lot of
makes me think of Valentine's Day.
Yeah, pretty much. which is really, really cool. And even some flowers will be consumed in some rituals. They'll be used as incense to be lit along with other herbs as well to fill up the room with smell. The smell alone was also said to enact visions, empowerment, and pleasing favor to, I said, God or goddess, or the spirit itself, even to the Holy Spirit, all sorts of things. So depending on what group would have been in the rose, as the rose also symbolizes divine knowledge, the opening of the mind, as mentioned before. And with the different levels would also not only symbolize the different levels of heaven, but it would symbolize the different levels of your growth. So when you think you have it all, you realize you know nothing, and you have to go and learn more again. So it's a cycle.
Right.
Yeah.
With the Gnostic belief, is it like the main symbolism for their cosmology, like with the time and the space and the unfoldment of that?
One of them, yes. Even the Rosicrucians would use it too. They would put the rose with the crucifixion portraits, or symbolize sacrifice as well. And resurrection being a huge part of Gnosticism, being the rebirth. So, which is what is meant to symbolize your own personal rebirth, as all these stories are meant to serve you. So if you have a story and it doesn't personally serve you, it's not really much good to you. So
Right. What symbolism that most people don't know about the rose? Do you have you've done a lot of research on it, or some notes at least? Do you think there is more symbolism that's really not like on Google that you could talk about?
Well, these days we know a lot of things. So a lot of stuff has been pretty much spoken about one way or another, whether in books or something like that. Google's gotten incredibly clever now, especially with the use of AI. So you could look up sources now these days with even that chat GTP, I think it's called, or GPT, whatever it's called. You can use sources like that these days as well. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. I have a mate that's used it. I've used it once or twice for what's it called? One, I've used it for trying to find bike locations I can travel. So you can use it smart ways. I didn't know you could use it like that. So I tried it one day, asked me to find me a bike location I can go ride. It gave me a couple. So cool. And maybe one time I forgot what book I was meant to read. So I asked what book has this source, and it gave me the book. And so it's
yeah,
cool.
I've been using reverse photos where you can put your picture in there if you don't know what it is, and it will tell you where it came from. So that's Google. So
yeah, that's the
with
Google
the rose,
search. That's still good.
how far back do you think the symbolism of the rose goes?
Oh, that was a good one. Whoever first had the rose, whoever first grew it, whatever location it first grew in, basically where there were humans, there have been some use for it. So, like it's like with use of cannabis. That was one of the earliest plants they ever grew. So we were growing stuff. So no doubt someone would have grown a rose and started burning it, or ate a couple of petals and thought, well, this smells pretty. So that's what I would say would be the first use for it, honestly, would be from early humans. Mysteries, cult-wise, I'd say Sumeria would be, as that's recorded as the first civilization, depending on what you define as civilization. So regarding that, you would have the use of the rose being with Sumerian mystery groups, or the religion itself regarding goddess worship. So they goddess of love. Every religion has a goddess, some way or another, or many goddesses. So if you were to say there, I forgot the name of the goddess I'm thinking of. It might be Ishtar. It might be Ishtar. I think it is. Goddess of love, isn't she?
I think so. Fertility and love.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many.
So regarding her worship, you would have roses being used as well. Would have probably been used for not jewelry, but accessories for the hair, stuff like that as well. But water around bracelets for women as well. So they would use these in rituals and stuff like that. You might have roses around, petals around a person, or they might be sitting near a den of roses to symbolize that they've come of age and they're offering their service sexually to the temple cult, to which they believe that one of these men that they're offering their services to would either be someone from the village and they're performing a service for the village or city, or it was a god, or even a demigod, if you will, in shape-shifting in human form, that in turn would sleep with mortal women, and the woman herself could give birth to a man of great renown. So a demigod, a hero, or even a woman. Sometimes these children out of this union would also be sacrificed, being as a divine sacrifice for divine favor of the gods. So roses would have been used in their sex rituals, I would have no doubt. So I'd say religious wise, it would be Samaria. A lot of things come from Samaria. So even the Genesis story in general, their story of man and woman coming together, similar to the first creation story of the Bible, which is no doubt where they would have got it from and been influenced by it, especially being conquered by the Babylonians, which in turn also adopted Sumerian religion. So yeah, you would definitely have that being used within ritual rites, within goddess worship and sex rituals, and not just goddesses, also male gods too. Sex rituals conducted. There were fertility male gods, and people don't mention that. It's always blame women or something like that. No, some men's stuff got real freaky, and not even freakier. So if you look at some Baal worship, there was all various different versions of Baal. For instance, you have the word Molech, which basically just means a Baal child sacrifice. That's basically it. So this Baal worship was fertility worship as well. They had goddesses that, as well, being worshipped alongside Baal. Baal was meant to be, in some cases, either to be the husband of Asherah or even a son or even both. The use of Baal being a fertility god as well could most likely just be stolen from Asherah and then made male dominant. So this Baal worship that was taking place, they would have the priestesses have sex with men. It wasn't just normal men, though. They believed that these people would shapeshift as gods, or they were doing a service for the village. They were enacting a prophecy to give birth to a divine child, to which would bring renown, be a hero for their civilization, or they would sacrifice it. A lot of cases, they would sacrifice the young girls as well and young boys. So if certain cases of the years would take place, they would sacrifice at a certain famine, the drought. Okay, we need to sacrifice a child now. Nothing's working. So, for instance, just like that. But not all the time. Sometimes these children were brought up to be priests and priestesses. So we would have a continuum of a cycle of fertility worship taking place. And they would also use roses too, no doubt. So also other flowers, frankincense and myrrh as well, they would be burning. So they wouldn't just be burning the child per se as well. They'd be burning the objects with it for incense. So all that sort of stuff would have taken place too. Then we go to, what's it called? Carthage. We see mass graves of child sacrifice dedicated to God Baal. So they would have also used roses as well, just like the Romans. So they weren't always hostile towards each other. Some trade did take place as well. Also influencing for religions, mystery cults. So if you look at a rose, not just the rose itself, but the flower being opened, always symbolized the opening of mind, the union of opposites, life, death, rebirth. And life, death, rebirth was very mystical in many different groups, not just Christianity or even Judaism. It belonged to other religions too. We had dying and rising gods. So, yeah, also the act of love would also be seen as a means of worship as well to the gods. So you're enacting what the gods were doing. Gods too were seen as having sex and also doing rituals themselves, and even at sometimes laying down roses for their lovers or something,
Right.
Zeus or something.
Yeah, like, I mean, like back in the day, like the gods walked on earth. It wasn't just us,
Yeah.
praying to the sky. We felt like they were more among us than we do today. How do you think that has changed over the years, or why do you think that's changed over the years?
Christianity and Islam would be the main reason that's changed over the years, because of mass enforcements. No religion has enforced a way of life or being the way Christianity or Islam has. They are the main sources of change and a cause of a dark age, if you will, as well. A lot of burning took place. So they were the only real groups that were burning their own shit. So you just Jews did as well, don't get me wrong as well, but not at the level that Christians and Muslims were. That's a whole new level. They took that shit worldwide, not just in the Middle East or in little bits of Egypt or something. This is worldwide. So a worldwide practice of burning shit and burning people. No doubt that's going to cause destruction and loss of knowledge. Libraries were burnt. Many libraries were burnt. So because of this, religion changed. A personal relationship with God, in a sense, was frowned upon, unless in a context they didn't understand, and they had the church's guide. So that was mostly a deal with that. Even the use of religious objects would even change and be discarded as well. So Catholics would try to hold on to a tradition, same with Orthodox, and you had new Christians forming, saying no idols and nothing like that, trying to go back to early roots of Judaism. And again, religions change. So in the old days, we had idols, even of El and Yahweh, there were idols. and it was meant to be forbidden. But this is before the construction of the Torah. So we also had likeness of priests and their dedication to their god on coins, and sometimes even being printed next to the god. So regarding with real change, again, would be to the Christians and Catholics and Islam itself not wanting you to have your own personal relationship, to be able to control it. So
Right.
to limit the use of independent reading as well. So damage.
With the Catholicism and the rosary beads, is that a takeoff from the rose?
Yeah, no doubt. With the name as well being imparted with it, it would be. I think it'll be impacted with the rose, with the serpent, or rings of Saturn, all that sort of stuff as well, sort of shape as well, or
Right. The steps.
symbolizing life, death, rebirth, different levels. That's what I would probably put it down on, where that probably would have came from as well, or possibly even from some Greek or Roman group as well, possibly as well. They might have had something similar. I'm not too sure, 100% sure on that one. So
That just came to me. So like
Buddhist maybe as well, because there were Buddhist influencing Jewish religions too. So I would say that'd be more likely the money. It would probably come from the Jew, not sorry, from the Buddhist that traveled, So
what is the most fascinating thing that you find about the rose?
it's color and it's symbolism. I don't mind the color red, as red has a deep symbolic meaning, and I love all things to do with death, rebirth. And also I don't mind some things to do with love as well. So, and the blooming of life, the blooming of the mind or opening of the mind. So once closed, now open. I love that stuff. So
do you think that the rose, the color, the red, the life, the death, and love, do you think that all correlates? Like you have to die to yourself or to someone else in order to love?
yeah, no doubt. I would say as well, like to truly, like really love yourself, to understand life and not just be a cyborg, I guess. Yeah, you have to go through that period of rebirth and have knowledge. Even if you look at the colors of the rose, red and white, for instance, you would have them often mixed together. And that would also symbolize the rebirth, the washing away of sins, washing away of an old life, the dying of an old life and being reborn as pure. That's symbolized by white. Or even virginity, the act of marriage as well. They would use these flowers as well. So marriage ceremonies were a huge thing, not just within the whole world itself, but also in mystery schools as well, the symbolic marriage. So there's always symbolism with everything. Before something usually starts religious-wise, it's encoded with symbolism. So.
And what about the thorns of the rose?
I would say the thorns as well would represent duality. So, you can't love without being hurt in some ways or another. No matter what, someone's going to make you suffer. So it's about finding the right people to suffer for. So I would say that's to do with that as well.
And gnosis, knowledge, Sophia. What about Sophia?
Knowledge that cuts deep.
Go ahead.
The knowledge that cuts deep, all that sort of stuff.
That cuts deep. Okay, that's good. Yeah, that's really good. And do you think that people misrepresent the knowledge and the knowledge, how it cuts deep? Do you think there's a lot of shallowness in this industry?
All the time. There's also pride, spiritual pride. Everyone struggles with pride. I struggle with pride. But a lot of people don't understand a lot of this stuff because they don't read. They don't look at the old sources. They only rely on, say, a church leader. Same with Islam. They're not meant to have their own interpretation of a text. You have to ask a scholar or a priest, basically. It's usually the same with Christianity. You're meant to have their interpretation, not meant to have your own. But that wasn't the case. It was back in the day. And you would see this with the Essenes. They would have their own interpretations, write them down. The Essenes were a bit different. They weren't so much reinterpreting. They were trying to bring it back to its old lot because they knew the text had been fucked with. So they were trying to reinterpret it back to its original context. So people do that even today in a sense, but not quite in its original context. You have people taking out a scripture and then putting it into the modern day to fit a modern value or to fit a modern apocalypse or to fit a modern biblical prophecy. And that's nothing new. That was taking place in the ancient past too. So that's one reason they wanted to have a control system so you don't have your own sort of experiences as well or go too crazy as well. So there's duality sides of it. It's not just all bad. It's also got some good to it too. But yeah, the system of control was always going to have some negative options, and so not options, going to have negative consequences is what I should say. So we're meant to have our own individual path, you know, we're meant to be free. And that's something that Rose also symbolizes too, freedom, you know, freedom. Bloomed out.
Well, yeah. I picked the background with the lips, with the rose, because, you know, gnosis, you know, speaking gnosis and gnosis coming forth from the mouth, you know, and the red lips. I thought that was a good symbolism for the gnosis. The feminine
yeah, definitely is. Yeah, for sure. I'd say the rose itself is the feminine, and the stalk, the branch, and the thorns would also be the masculine. And then you got the middle would be both.
Both.
So,
where
yeah, entwined basically. Even where you got that in the middle there, you got them round, it's entwined.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a word for it. Gender inclusive dot of the monad.
True. Most people don't speak in that language, the monad, you know. So, like, speaking of gender inclusive, how do you think the misrepresentation of the spiritual beliefs in Gnosticism has changed in that aspect?
The evolving of Christianity, also the persecution. Because of persecution and being driven underground, new groups would emerge, and because of those new groups emerge, even more groups would emerge out of that group and split. Whenever a new religion forms or a group forms, there's always a split and more groups form. And because of that, a lot of Gnostics have lost their way. They don't want to be unified. They forget that the ancient Gnostics evolved all shared each other's writings and would interpret them how they would like. Even if they disliked the group, they would still use the writing. There's some Gnostics that did argue, and unfortunately that happens today. There's a lot of egos, and that's to do with the personal experience. It's good to have a personal experience, but it's not to be say I experienced this, so your everything you is as experience is wrong. My experience is great. That's what Christians do, and that's what's fucked up a lot of shit. And I sometimes have dealt with that with Gnostics, and it's a shame to see where we should all be in it together. The world hates us enough already, so division is never good. You know. Unity is the answer in a sense. And that's one reason why the early Christians succeeded, because they weren't fighting like they did now. At first, they were unified. There was some infighting, but not on the scale it was. It was just disagreements. And then later on, we had killing. We had more than that because it became a political entity. And you can call that the beginnings of the Catholic Church, the Roman Church. So that's where all problems originated from regarding Christianity. Yeah. But longer, I say about 1,700 years have been fucking up shit for. So
well, true, but like in the beginning, it was like 300 years of destruction, complete destruction.
Burning, basically.
And
yes, which is pretty bad. So because of that, we've lost a lot of knowledge too, and because of that loss of knowledge, we have lost a part of ourselves, and we're basically grasping on mostly straws on a religious Bible that's full of spelling mistakes, mistranslated, and missing text. Like what we're reading today is all from the 4th century. We're not reading those tiny 2nd century fragments. Only a few people are. So, and then if you want to go 1st century, the only possible 1st century Christian New Testament text we have is Gospel of Thomas. If you go early 1st century, basically not regarding anything New Testament wise, you're finding Gnostic texts, and it's usually to do with esotericism or magic or cosmology. So that's another indicator that Gnostic Christianity is older, but obviously it is. We also have Celsus writings, who only mentions Gnostic groups. He didn't mention the Catholics because they weren't organized then. Then we have that Marcelina lady who I mentioned last time, and she was invited to Rome to be a grand witness of Pope Insidious becoming Pope, or better title would be the Bishop of Rome. So we're showing in not just so much individual branches that are fighting, we're showing some sort of form of unification still going on. And it wasn't until after that something's happened. So it started with the popes. That's where it all began. That's where things went wrong. The bishops of Rome. So
going from like it's all inside of you and learning what you are and who you are versus going through someone else.
Yes. So it was the popes that stopped that for you going with him. You know, where the older ones would tell you to go with him, especially the Jewish Christians and the early Gnostics. That's one reason they were fasting, going out in the wilderness. They're reflecting what Jesus was doing, basically. So you had a group that was practicing baptism, ritual enactments, magic, if you will, invocations, summoning angels, prayer, use of healing, and most importantly, they were going within. They were doing their own individual path and then joining together as a community, which is real
As an
cool. So that was
archetype,
where, yeah,
as an
basically,
archetype,
yes.
the rose itself as an archetype, do you think it just has healing properties just by looking at it?
Yeah, it can as well. For sure, it can soothe the mind. People use it as incense to calm the mind as well. So it's got some properties. We could also eat it too and put it with our food if we wanted, you know?
Right.
So it's
Have some
not
real
a toxic
tea.
plant and nothing like that. Yeah. And we've been using it for a long time, so no doubt. So the flower itself has always been a big part of symbolism. You know? So it's a part of life. No flower, you probably say you have no life at all. So, you know, we need the
So
fruit
the
to
color,
blossom as well.
right? Well, speaking of fruit, I was going to ask about the apple and the symbolism, the pentagram that's inside the apple, which represents Venus, and then Venus representing also the rose and the red color altogether. Do you think that there is a correlation to that with the
Yeah,
five, the
definitely.
pentacle, the star?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say that it would represent, you know, the layers of reality, the connection of divine femme and masculine with all things. So the divine principle, in other words, divine source, everything coming from its root, everything coming from a seed, everything coming from a source. You know? So one way is you're the seed as well, that's opening up, blooming.
Okay, so let's talk about the masculine aspect of the rose.
Well, regarding masculine and feminine, let's go. Just think where I should go onto this one, how I should begin. Masculine is the thought, and then feminine is the part of creation. So say you want to buy, you want to make a chair. You think of the chair in your head first and you create it. It's given birth. So what's given the thought is the masculine. What gives creation is also the feminine. There's also dual aspects of it. So regarding masculine is also represented in our universe, feminine, our Mother Earth. So if you look at masculine, it also represents chaos as well. It can also represent order. When you have masculine and feminine, it recognizes both chaos and order under complete order. So unification of these opposites. So the masculine can represent the right and the feminine can represent the left. It can be opposite way around as well. There's no rules on this stuff. So the masculine as well represents not just a thought, but will. And the feminine would represent the act. So, but again, that role can be reversed. So depending on what group you'll be looking at, who you're going to be asking, what their interpretation is, groups varied, beliefs varied as well. There were beliefs that the masculine alone was archonic and balance of both masculine and feminine were of the aeons, so perfect balance of God. So in other words, the archons that fell or led astray, or even you could say fallen out, if you will, whatever term you'd like to use. Masculine's also dominance as well, where feminine's more submissive. So you have the two together and it brings balance. So we have order again. So order in the chaos.
And we're not talking about men and women. We're talking about energies.
Yes, that's right. And some people confuse that for the thing. It's a big thing.
Yes,
It's like when you say the masculine and feminine concepts of God, this is referring to energies, God's beyond sex, basically, or the monad, if you want to use this term, or energy is what I like term energy. So that's why I like that term. Like energy, I like monad, I also like God, I like them all. So that is in reference to the source of all, what we're an image of, male and female. Basically, we're in replication of that energy, of that source. So basically a copy, if you will. So everything's like a copy of something. Like we're replicants of this universe itself, this earth as well. So we're replicants of the divine masculine and feminine being taking place of Mother Earth and Father Universe, if you will. So
right. Well,
even
I
the
know,
universe is planets, so full of feminine.
I'm into astrology, so like each planet has their masculine and feminine aspects to them. So it's like, and like, a lot of people think the feminine is the chaos and the masculine is order. You know what I mean? But I'm researching the like Egyptian tarot cards that I've been using, and the book that I'm reading, it's all about the opposites, like the earth was masculine and the sky was feminine. So it's switched in everything, you know. It's
Yeah,
interesting that how we are as human beings, huh?
pretty much. Like even when we look at some early creation myths, and we can find this in some Christian schools of thought as well. If you want to call it Gnostic, we'll call it Gnostic, as technically it kind of is, but this term is given to us. We have gods, beings, entities somehow arguing and creation coming out of this, which is
Yes,
kind
the
of funny as well.
primordial elements just going at it, huh?
Yeah, basically, until they find balance, and then you have this universe returning back to a state of harmony. So, you know, it's pretty interesting. It's all symbolism. It's like even when we've seen brothers and sisters fighting, we have Cain killing Abel, two brothers. We see earlier myths of brother gods and brothers and sister gods fighting each other, and even brother killing brother, and then brother being resurrected by sister and making love to said sister. All sorts of trippy stuff went on in the ancient past. They were encoded with sex, they were encoded with symbolism. They were romantics in their own rights as well. I like that sort of stuff with some of the romance stuff. But it's how it was in the past. They were obsessed with sex, in a sense, more than what we are today.
You think?
But trippy, in a sense, and not. Like, we're more, in a sense, dirty in our obsession with sex. Their obsession with sex is more spiritual. So we're not really chasing after a spiritual sex. We're chasing after a lust material sex.
Right, right.
Not
More of a sensation.
Yes, yes. So that's the real differences of that. So back in the day, we would have men rubbing a giant penis statue saying, "Give me a child," you know. So stuff like that went on.
I don't want to reenact that.
Yeah, you know, people were pretty hardcore back then. We had people basically that would be naked selling substances mixed with murder, cause erections, you know, and then someone would come down to cause that to calm down and be replaced with the next person with another signpost saying, "Here's your heart on drugs." You know, not quite at that detail, but you see that in ancient Greece
we have
too.
that stuff today, just not in that sense, I guess, you know. So
Yeah,
pharmakia,
that's right.
do you think that the rose has played a part in pharmakia besides just like incense and
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
But even
my
incense,
dog's
in a
moving around.
sense, would be seen as a form of pharmacy as well, as a form of pharmacy or a form of drugs, divine drugs, theikos pharmaca. So even the act of lighting the incense was also seen as healing. So you can still say that was medicine if you like. But in regarding to rose, yes, it was definitely used in medicine. They would crush it up, put it in with other substances, you know, to make it smell good too, or to bring a different color to the substance that they were creating as well, or to add symbolism or power to that said substance they were making or creating. It's one reason they also added to incense. There was a use for it. They didn't light it all the time as well. There was certain things that they lit on certain days, certain times of the month, of the year, certain enactments of the planets, etc. You know, everything was encoded by something. So there were certain sort of rules to it, things that were seen pleasing at certain times of the year as well. So all that sort of stuff was taken into account too. And it wasn't just red roses obviously being used. We had white roses too. So,
All
you know,
kinds of
all that
colors,
sort of stuff. Yeah, mixed with other flowers as well. So.
In your notes, do you have any notes in down there that you've written down that you want to talk about?
Well, I pretty much doled through all my little notes from here. I pretty much remembered most of off the heart. Let's see what I've got here. I've got the Rosicrucians and how they used it in crucifixion, but I've used it. But that's to symbolize suffering and resurrection. So again, the foundation of the masculine and feminine being reunited together. So having the fall and being the reunification, you can also see that as a fall and the return of Sophia to the divine realms or the pleroma, or the divine spark ushering in its return and going through a cycle of life, death, rebirth, and purification before able to do so. But I also quite like the use of the sub rosa, how I mentioned before, with the use of the Romans leaving roses in their Senate rooms to symbolize this meeting and the words being taken place are to remain private, and how that would form into a lot of esoteric schools of thought, and they would use the rose in their rooms to symbolize that this is a private discussion, or they would use it in their own private homes to symbolize that this is a privacy for their own selves with God, which is really cool. And
yeah, it is. That sounds like also like a ritual.
Yeah,
you know, with magic and all that. Maybe chanting with the roses.
Yeah, 100%, no doubt. They probably would have done that every time they placed a petal on the floor or on the incense burner itself, no doubt. there would have been some chanting going along, or invocations as well. Invocations, angelic names, holy names, even probably, depending on what group, secret names of a said god. There were secret names of El, for instance, or even Yahweh. We had secret names. There were some Jews that believed that the reason Jesus was so powerful, had his miracles, if you will, was because we went to the temple, he stole the secret name of Yahweh or the secret name of God, and thus, because of that, it's lost now, and that was how he was able to perform his miracles. So, which is interesting to mention. I didn't mention, well, I have mentioned the context of it, that the falling of Sophia and the falling of the divine spark, that's also symbolized by the rose petals that drop and fall.
Oh,
so
that's
the spirit descending into matter. Another one it symbolizes too. And when the the rose starts dying, that also symbolizes the decaying flesh. So our flesh, that's material that decays. It's not eternal, but the soul's eternal. So again, going through different layers, going through different petals, different bodies until returning to the source. So each flower that drops and starts getting closer to the middle.
That's interesting. Like it's going from the air to the earth.
Yeah, and then some get there first before other petals. So symbolizing, the divine return, those chosen by God out of 1,000. So another saying of Jesus with the Gospel of Thomas.
I wonder, like in wedding ceremonies, is when the bridesmaid or the flower girl drops the flowers, if that's kind of goes along with that symbolism, before,
Oh, for sure. They'll be going through all those lifetimes that they've dropped, they've fallen away, and now the divine feminine, masculine, the two souls are rejoining as one. So a big party about it. That's a secret of the wedding chamber, divine mystery of marriage. So the reunification of the soul.
What is the different symbolisms of the rose versus the Bible?
Okay. Well, the Bible itself, the whole Bible, if we want to add both the Old and New Testament, and this is in both cases, they were never meant to be one book. The Old Testament was never meant to be just one book. The New Testament as well, because they were all written in different groups. So the Old Testament was placed into one book because of the construction of the Septuagint. Other than this, we only had 5 books of Moses. In most cases, it was oral. So the Greeks wanted a complete copy because they want to store everything in their library that was going along the main route, and how it may have influenced Greek culture, or how Greek culture was superior. So it wasn't always what people think. So King Ptolemy of Egypt wanted the Bible as well. He was a philosopher in his own right, knew many languages. He could speak Hebrew, he could speak Aramaic, he could speak Greek. So that's impressive. Probably even, I think, been Persian. So he wanted a copy, and he told the Jewish elites that, look, if you guys don't get together with all your rabbis and different groups and construct me your religious works in Greek, so I have a copy, I'm going to do it myself. They panicked and did it. And then you had other Jewish groups that hated that and went out into the deserts and would write their own text saying, no, we're having this in Aramaic, or we're doing our own, they're messing it up. And then again, after that's constructed, we had people taking that out, trying to go back to Hebrew as well, or Aramaic. We also had Greek text individual floating around too. So because of all that, we also have Christianity now, to take an example. We had Marcion, who compiled the first Christian Bible. So the first Christian canon. 200 years later, the Catholic Church make theirs in challenge of Marcion. And then we have a Latin version as well. So in regarding of these different Christian groups, we had different Christians as well. We had different types of Jews. So in reference to the symbolism, that would all be unique to every single group that has taken place within those writings of the biblical text. So that's going to be a complex answer if you're going to answer it factually. But in regarding to, if you want to talk about the Bible mystery itself, then their unification of the rose, they're not much interested in symbolism, to be honest with mainstream Christianity. Symbolism has little regard unless it's to do with Jesus on the cross. That's as big a symbolism they've got. If they've got a rose, they might see it on a cross in some art and go, okay, that's Jesus' blood. I mean, it's the best they're going to do. So rather it was engaging with the mysteries, those that were the true Christians, which would be the Jewish Gnostic Christians. In some cases, these Gnostic Christians were Jewish Christians. I'm just calling it as Gnostic as a different styled. So you had ones that were full on by Torah, and then you had ones that were more involved in symbolism and growth. So not so much under strict dogma of law. So you had ones that were only focusing on circumcision, and you had other ones that were actually more focused on engaging in teachings of Jesus being a separate type of Jew. So because of that, you would have a recognition of different parts of the symbolism of a said rose. So yeah.
The rose is such a lovely symbolism. Do you listen to a lot of music?
Bits and pieces. I listen to a lot of chants these days. I don't mind my chants.
Chant.
Like, yeah, old school chants,
How
ancient stuff.
often do you think the rose is brought up in these chants and in the music that you listen to?
Not too many, to be honest. As I said,
Not too many?
depending on what group you listen to, if you're going to listen to maybe something like pagan, you might find something, or if I find something to do with, I more find stuff to do with flowers, not really so much the rose being mentioned, but you can still say the rose is a flower. You can unique these two. So, but it's mostly a flower I've mostly heard. So, flower of life, for instance. So,
Well, I was
or even
listening
just,
to Perfect Circle earlier, the rose, before we started this. So that's why I was asking that question, because, you know, it is a
okay,
symbolism, not just of love, but like in like music, they use it, you know, as, you know, well, for love songs, or for like that symbolism is like feeding on the rose, would be like feeding on the feminine. Do you think that the Rosicrucians have used it instead of actually uplifting women in their everyday life? They uplift the rose in the symbolism of Sophia?
oh, for sure, for sure. Well, any Gnostic would have really praised Sophia. They would have had some sort of symbolizing with her. Even the act of bread and wine as well. Wine being red, symbolized by blood. You can also symbolize that as the rose, and the bread being the gnosis of the spirit. So you have the two joining in, entwining into together, which is pretty cool. But wine can also symbolize, as I said, spirit. The bread symbolizes knowledge, so knowledge coming into spirit. So a lot of stuff has to do with symbolism, really. So Sophia was usually held in high regards, and as mentioned before, the rose does symbolize Sophia, but it also symbolizes Christ. And Christ isn't just Jesus. Christ is a figure that you achieve, basically. It's a way of life, but it's also the divine spirit in a sense that's gone through the rebirth, depending on what form of Christianity you're looking at. So the Christ is both belongs to male and female. So it's in some Gnostic schools of thought, Mary Magdalene and Jesus were both the Christ. Consoles, divine pairs. So again, depending on what form you're looking at, you know, so it's going to change in that regard. In a sense,
Right.
a lot of Christians today don't see the Holy Spirit as female or feminine at all. They see it as masculine. It's all just male on male, dude on dude. You know,
Right.
so
Right. So like the symbolism of the rose, when you just initially think of it, what is the symbolism that comes to your mind first? So as a
rebirth,
Gnostic bishop? Rebirth.
yeah,
Okay.
and pleroma,
Proma.
yeah,
And why is that?
the layers and rings and the shape of it. So when I first looking into Gnostic and stuff, I was looking at a lot of symbolisms, and I noticed a lot of the symbols had to do with rebirth, many of them, or eternity as well. So, or a never ending, never beginning, all that sort of stuff, you know. So rose usually came up as well, even spiral art that we'd see, or the flower of life. All this sort of art that was taking place was being done under psychedelics as well. So we were gaining something from within. They weren't just tripping balls, they were looking within, you know. So it was a divine
Right.
act that they were partaking, you know. And sometimes they wouldn't just trip, they would massive fast to enact that vision too. So it was different ways of enacting it too. And sometimes they would be surrounded in rooms of, say, flowers, roses. And that would also help bring about the vision as well, or put them in a good spot.
Well, the memory, I was going to say, like, you know, scents can bring back memories as well. Do you think that's associated with like the past and how human beings have this this ancestral memory?
Yeah, I reckon also. I think also a lot to do with the reincarnation. I think it's why we have memories passed on or encoded, say, even with the animals and all that sort of stuff in us. So I see everything just returning and being basically a giant recycling ground. So that's why I see this universe as just a recycling of energy, this physical form of it at least.
So Gnostics believe in reincarnation. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. There were some groups that didn't though. Like, I guess not really groups. Shouldn't say group. I'm also say like freelancers, because we did have freelance Gnostics. So we had some that were almost atheists that believe once you were dead, you were dead. That was it. And it's to gain knowledge now. So that was more smaller in number though. But most in general believed in reincarnation. like the largest portion of it. It's more the ones that didn't have a proper understanding of it basically might have said that, no reincarnation because of mainstream Christianity, or even some forms of, I guess, mainstream Judaism as well, because there were ancient Jews that did believe in reincarnation. There were ones that believed that God had the power to bring a soul out of Sheol, and put it into a new body. That's reincarnation. So,
Right.
but that wasn't reserved for everyone. Certain souls, but depending on the belief, some believed all souls had to reincarnate in order to perfect themselves, and that would be defined as proto-Gnostic, so beginnings of Gnosticism.
Okay, so like with your belief in reincarnation, do you believe you'll ever get off the wheel of reincarnation, or do you believe that the soul will become one or whatever?
I don't know.
Good
But
answer.
belief-wise, that's just belief-wise. I just want to put I don't know in a reference to saying that I'm not going to tell anyone else, because I don't. You know what I mean? So none of the stuff can be physically proven. So in regarding my belief of reincarnation, I have, I guess, a couple. I see it as one day I will stop reincarnating, or this whole system will just keep going on and there is no stop. Who knows? Who say it doesn't just continue to go on? I honestly think that you have a choice later on if you get to a certain level. I think you go as an angel, and from there you're that vision that inspires someone else, that angelic host that visits you. I say that's someone's lifetime that they've already lived, that soul has come to visit you or whatever, and to give you some sort of knowledge. And I say maybe if the world's too fucked up or something on a certain place, maybe that soul chooses to go back to bring some light. That's my sort of take on it in a sense. But yeah, I'm happy to see that there's nothing as well. I can accept this too. So I like to be a realist as well. So whenever I speak about belief, I don't really speak about my own personal beliefs. I like to also give some theories as well, because I know that beliefs can cause trouble. And I don't want to shit on someone else's belief as well, where a lot of people are prepared to do that. I don't like doing that.
Right.
I prefer to speak historical side of things. But yeah, that's my belief on reincarnation, that we either just keep on going on, there's just no stop, or some souls have a choice to stop, and you can choose to go back if you want. So perfection of the soul, I guess. I see it as we're all one, but separate. So different elements or aspects of God, basically. That's what I see, or different aspects of energy.
Well, I have a belief in a reincarnation, but mine's more comes from a like astrology kind of thing. So it's not the same, I'm probably sure. As far as in like the symbolism of the rose, what angel represents, or what rose represents the angel, the rose and an angel? Is there particular angels that the rose, when you see it, that's what it would be as, or comes with?
I'm sure there would be, to be honest. And am I one? Let's see. I think I had one written down somewhere else, to be honest. Might not be here. I think I'm thinking of an Olympic spirit, to be honest.
Oh, what was that?
I think I might be thinking of an Olympic spirit.
Oh, okay. Well, either one, it would just be interesting to know.
Hagith, Venus, an Olympic spirit. Also, you could call it a genius spirit. That would be represented by a certain angel, I believe. Oh, never mind. There is, but not in what I've written down anyway. I've just written other ones. But Hagith is an Olympic spirit, basically. You can even think that as a daemon or a Pacific entity, or even an angelic aspect of an angel or an aspect of God, depending on the view of what you would see as this. That would be represented by a rose or a spiraling rose. And we would see these being placed at the Olympic Games in order to honor this daemon to protect a said athlete, or to gain athlete divine favor.
Interesting. Nathan, do you have your own YouTube channel, correct?
Yes.
Where can people find you?
They can find me on Spiritual Level Being on YouTube. And then I've also got another channel that's sort of a group, that's the Gnostic Union, but my main business is Spiritual Level Being. They can find me on Facebook too, same name, and same name on the other name on Facebook too. So I'm in a few groups. They can also find me on Gnostic View. I'm an admin there as well. So a few different places they can find me. Not too hard to find. But my YouTube is where it's at. It's where my sources are at.
Do you have any more upcoming interviews or anything that you would like anyone to watch?
I have some planned after I get a certain book. I'm hoping to be able to interview Edward Dodge, wonderful scholar. I ordered his book on the goddesses in the Ice Age, or Sacred Goddesses in the Ice Age. I forgot the title name. I have to relook it up. Great. You can find him on YouTube as well. He does a lot of podcasts. He's fantastic. So I'm hoping to interview him, and maybe, hopefully, I would like to reach out to Dr. David Litwer. I'd like to speak to him eventually. So then my plans eventually, but I need to get this other one out of the way first. Other than that, not so much, no. More just my own spiritual work, So
how's your reading? How's your reading going on the ceremony magic the book that you posted the other day? Have you gotten into that one?
I got a couple of pages in. To be honest, the most reason I bought that book was because I wanted a few angel sources, like angelic magic that was traced back to ancient Judaism or Enochian magic. That's the only reason I got it. There was another book I was thinking about getting, Agrippa, but it was a couple $100, like $100 or $50. So I chose the $50 one. So I got this one. So it was a bit cheaper. So that was more just a side hustle in a sense. So I am studying some ancient magical and invocations and rituals involving Gnosticism, Judaism, Hellenistic Judaism as well. So Greek influenced Judaism. And I'm reading the Septuagint. I'm halfway through there, and I'm translating the Gospel of Luke, and I've almost finished that too. I'm on chapter 14, almost on chapter 15 now.
Interesting.
So they're my major projects. I'm hoping to knock them out the way so then I have a lot more free time.
Right.
It takes a lot of time translating.
And going on myself, but we're going to end it here. Just a little short of an hour. So, but it's been great having you, Nathan. You're a plethora of information. I really enjoy talking to you about all the information that you have. And maybe back down the road, we can have you back, okay?
No worries. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks, guys. See you later.
Many blessings, everyone.